We're a nonprofit movement partner. We have trained staff and leaders from 2,200 groups in the first 6 years, and they are listed in the scrolling list on each of our web pages. We do online organizing strategy, training, and staffing to engage members and win campaigns. So a lot of what we do is training, and that's really why we were created as a nonprofit. We also do one-on-one, we work with groups one-on-one in campaigns. And we're proud members of the Pacific Media Workers Guild, their freelancers division. So, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but just to be clear about this, online organizing is increasingly important for finding and engaging our people, harnessing broader community support, pressuring targets and secondary targets where they're vulnerable. And many businesses, corporations are increasingly vulnerable on social media. They're sensitive to pressure and how their identity looks on social media. It's also useful for creating a news source for news staffs that have really been eaten away by layoffs at news outlets. So oftentimes groups are effectively using Twitter and getting their own video footage on the evening news, and quotes from leaders at events get quoted, and even as we well know, entire tweets get inserted into news articles. And that is going to continue to be extremely important as with all the shakeups within the media industry. And finally, just helping shape the narrative. So to the extent that we have an ability to control what people see through our messaging on social media, we have the ability to shape the narrative. So why invest in training ourselves up? So one thing is that social media habits are changing all the time, right? So for example, just one example is that young people increasingly are using messaging apps more than, say, Facebook. So those changes are happening all the time. It's not like, using digital tools and tactics in organizing is different than using traditional organizing. Traditional organizing, person-to-person organizing, there are some principles that are extremely valuable, extremely important. They haven't changed a whole lot over time. They're just as important as they ever were. And so what we're looking to do is pair the digital tools and tactics with those core principles. But unfortunately, it takes more work to stay up on what can be most powerful with social media and online tools. The second thing is that personal use is not the same as organizing use. So we might think that by hiring someone who's in their 20s and grew up kind of with social media, that we're kind of bringing that into the organization, but it doesn't really work that way. What we've seen is that a lot of the young people who are taking training and really absorbing it effectively know how to use social media really well, but they also recognize that they're not an organizer. They haven't been trained in organizing. And to use those tools and tactics in ways that strengthen organizing is a little bit different. Tools are developing. So 6 years ago when we started, the cost of CRMs and data management was different. That's come down a lot. There are different tools developing all the time. And in fact, we have to constantly we have to go through our recordings that we make available really, certainly every year, but every 6 months to some degree as things change. And as Facebook features change and Twitter has changed, and things are changing all the time, and there are new tools now. Geofencing, mobile ads that are relatively new, chatbots, Facebook Messenger chatbots are developing in interesting ways now. And prices are coming down and things are being made more accessible for smaller groups. And so tactics are changing. So the biggest example of that is the way peer-to-peer texting took off with Bernie's campaign in 2016. And now, just in the last 2 or 3 years, that has spread through to a lot of groups using peer-to-peer texting. But, as more and more people use it, then the regulators and the phone companies can constrain use and change it. And so, again, we have to adapt and evolve based on regulation and changes in ability to use certain tools. And then there's evidence-based best practices. There are now a number of different organizations that have been set up specifically to do controlled experiments and to work with organizing groups on controlled experiments around effective use of Facebook advertising, effective use of canvassing, effective use of emailing, etc. And there are evidence-based now best practices that are coming out all the time. And it really is incumbent on us to know what they are. So we make sure to integrate all of that into our trainings. And finally, the antis are investing heavily online. We know that, right? And so it's incumbent on us to be there too. So what is SMT's Digital Campaigning Certificate Program? So it started, the very bare bones version of it started 3 years ago. We had 10 groups involved then. We jumped to 40 groups. And then this year, there are 230 people in the program. And next year, so we're making a number of changes between this year and next year, and actually have even implemented a bunch of different changes this year in response to what we've learned, and we'll go over that. But the essence of it is that it's live online sessions every 1 to 2 weeks from September to June, high engagement, as high as we can make it. It's a webinar. I mean, it's a meeting, a Zoom meeting, not a webinar. Like, it's not set up as it is today, where you can't see each other, you can't unmute yourselves, you can't talk to each other as easily. We have an experienced, diverse instructor team of between 15 and 20 people. Actually, part of that team includes people who are in the program. We've just found that there's a huge range of experience from people who register in the program, and we really try to identify people who have particular strengths to contribute in certain areas. And that's been, I think, something that participants have really appreciated, is hearing different voices from peers weighing in on particular topics. And so, you know, we'll invite people, if there's a particular topic coming up, who has a lot of experience with this topic, and then we'll talk with them beforehand one-on-one to make sure that what they can present is actually going to be helpful to the group. There are in-depth recordings with quizzes on 20 plus key topics, and I'll show you what those are. There's a community of peers, which is, as I mentioned, really, I think, one of the real strengths of this over a long period. So people can check back in with each other and come back to that community. And you can pick as few as 5 topics out of the 25 that we cover for the certificate level 1. And so we've developed that just recently in response to, you know, a lot of people who don't necessarily have time to do all the topics and don't want to have to make that commitment over a 9-month period, but they want to be able to do the topics that are of highest priority for them. Okay, so the curriculum, let's take a look at that. So this is just the landing page, and we're just going to breeze through this curriculum very quickly. So we spent a bunch of time working on developing a campaign plan, whether it's an actual campaign plan or an annual plan for your online organizing, and also developing metrics and understanding ways to measure if that plan and whether what you're doing is actually helping to build power. We do a bunch of work on message development and testing your messaging and narrative development. And Richard Kirsch does a bunch of instruction, including direct feedback, having people work on their narrative and messaging and give direct feedback in small groups. And we think that's really critical, because if we don't have good messaging, then all the online organizing in the world won't really help us. Online fundraising for organizing groups, and we really put that in the context of broader fundraising in terms of offline major donor fundraising. Kind of depending on your size, different kinds of online fundraising make sense, and you can use online channels to bolster the rest of your fundraising. Facebook for organizing, we do a bunch on Facebook Live and how to set up that kind of a flow in your organizing to absorb people most effectively off of that. Lead ads and kind of messenger chatbots. We kind of look at a bunch of different innovations with Facebook, how you can use Facebook for organizing. As well as the best ways of crafting memes. We find that oftentimes people are not designing memes or designing their calls to action on Facebook to maximize sharing and to maximize driving people to take action. So we focus on that as well. With Twitter, we do a segment on building your following really aggressively. And it's really cool because over the 3 weeks that people are implementing those methodologies to aggressively build their account in ways that will help them in organizing, many groups are starting to build their accounts by like 250 followers per week. And so just hearing from each other about what they're doing is really, I think, inspiring. And then we do a bunch on orchestrating effective Twitter storms. Email best practices, digital security. We go over mass texting, peer-to-peer texting, and short codes, which makes sense when, what are the different tools, price points, benefits and disadvantages to different tools. Now with CRMs, there are beginners and there are people who are quite advanced with the use of constituent relationship management systems there to handle their emails and data. And so we tend to break that out into beginner folks, and we help them get experience with Action Network, and then more advanced folks who may be using Every Action or a range of other tools. And in that case, we're talking with them about more advanced tools and tactics, integrations, automations, segmenting their lists, making sure they have good deliverability, things like that. With media, it's a range of tools and tactics for cultivating journalists and maximizing media coverage before, during, and after actions. Optimizing your website, video, and with video, we're really focused on quick and dirty, rapid response video. So, if you need something fancy, you might send it out, or you might have your own internal staff for that. But what we're talking about is increasingly video is the key it's such an important tool for online work. And so what we're talking about is quick and dirty ways to really capture the most inspiring moments and the most powerful testimonials of your work to drive action. Using Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, we do a bunch on that. And there are groups that are really using WhatsApp in really strong ways particularly for organizing in the immigrant community. Snapchat, geo-filters can be extremely powerful. We're setting one up right now actually for a group in Portland that needs to boost visibility during a 3-day jazz festival. So that's going to be fun. Petition best practices, activating members online and building an online organizing committee, budgeting. So really looking at what your whole online organizing budget should look like or can look like, depending on kind of what size organization you are, et cetera. Campaign management and team collaboration tools. This is so important and so vastly underused. So many tools to be more effective and efficient as an organizer or as a communications person. And then just campaign management tools like Asana or Monday or Trello. And ad campaigns to build your list, activate your base, and pressure targets. Ad campaigns, we do a bunch on that. We have sessions on Facebook ads and Twitter and Google text display and YouTube ads. And all of these things are increasingly important to understand how they work together. Now, what we've learned, and just really kudos to the current participants who spoke up and who helped figure out, what we could do to make this a better program. One is that there's a need for levels beyond just the regular and advanced certificates. So we thought this is the first year that we are offering this as a certificate program. And that's because we understand that there are a lot of folks, whether communications or directors or organizers, whatever your kind of job title is, or you're doing a little bit of everything, that recognize that digital skills and digital organizing skills are kind of our part of the future, right? And so to have some recognized certificate of having learned a certain amount is worth it. And we found that a lot of supervisors actually wanted to register their folks and asked that their folks, said, we'll register for this to you, but we'll register you for this, but we want you to get the certificate. We want some evidence that you've really learned something and taken something away from this. So we think that that's really important. But we also recognized that so that there's a need for not just 2 different levels where the regular certificate involves a couple of hours a week and the advanced certificate involves a deeper learning, and that requires 4 to 5 hours a week. But in addition to that, many people really couldn't go through, understandably, 9 months doing that every, week in and week out, right? So some are, And you can see actually in these charts, you can see that about, I think almost like 20%, 25% are going for some level of advanced certificate. But even there, you can see that the blue here, this blue slice, 8% are going for an advanced certificate level 3. That's the highest level, that's if you do all of the topics, right? So pretty much 42% are going for the initial level of completing between 5 and 10. That's between, a quarter and a half or so of the topics. So what we're doing is integrating the ability to be even more flexible, where you can pick just the topics that are the top priority for you and your organization. And also, we can now be a course auditor. And this picture on the right just indicates, you can see that roughly a quarter of the folks are, and not everybody has responded actually, there's just 113, so kind of half the people responded on this, but of those, a quarter want to be auditors. And auditors, really, there's a whole range of people who take this, partly if there are other staff from the organization already involved and they want to kind of keep a handle on what they're learning and what they're exposed to people who are more advanced and they just want to see if there's topics that are coming up that they're not so familiar with, and they really are not interested in the certificate, but they just want to kind of keep their finger on the pulse. Okay, here are the other things that we've really learned this year. First of all, that we're going to make the next session, the next cohort, the live sessions are going to be required, at least 75%. So whatever certificate you're going for, let's say you want to do 10 of the topics, then you just need to make sure that 75% of those 10 topics you are present for the live session. We'll probably make exceptions to this if there are folks who register from Australia and it's in the middle of the night for them. We can be somewhat flexible around that. But the reason that we're making this required is that we discovered that people are much more likely to be successful if they make the live sessions, because it's a deadline. They then are more likely to keep up with all the other assignments around that live session. They don't feel as behind. And also it's a way for them for supervisors to respect that time. So there have been supervisors who've said, can you watch that live session recording at night after work because of how busy we are, et cetera. And so this is just a way to provide scaffolding and support for folks to make it a priority. We also have learned that registrants need support with their supervisors, and this is, just building on the last point. And so we also think that supervisors need support to have a conversation with the registrant around what are the priority topics and how will the learning time be scheduled. Like, is there an expectation that it will all be on work time or part on work time and part on personal time, but just ensuring that there's that conversation. And so we actually have I have a link later to so this time, for the first time, we have a registration form that must be completed at the time of payment or before payment by the participant and their supervisor. Their supervisor also can be on the mailing list so that they get the weekly emails just to keep, and so it enables them right here is the list of all the different topics, to have that conversation together around what are the priorities for the organization. And then other things like, how will this be scheduled, right? On work time or off work time, et cetera. Things like, our learning is going to be shared in staff meetings. How are we going to make the most use of this organizationally? That's something that we hadn't done as intentionally before. We also have found out that people really would appreciate being paired up with a peer or two over the year to support each other and encourage each other. And so we're going to be doing that. We're actually implementing that now. So there's a lot of people pairing up to finish completing the course over the summer. But we'll be doing that from the beginning in the next cohort. And it'll be optional, but if you choose to be paired up and all three of you complete at least a minimum certificate level, then you would graduate with teamwork distinction. We also found that there were a certain percentage of people who just fell behind, pretty quickly at the start because they just didn't get up and going. And so we had 15-minute check-in sessions. And we found that those were super people were very appreciative of those, just as a kind of face-to-face. Didn't need to be long, but it was a check-in to get to know the person a little bit and what they were looking to do with the course, and then help them get unstuck with whatever it was and give them some encouragement. So we will definitely be doing that in a more intentional way. And along with that, we'll be providing extra support at the start with the platform for beginners. We found that there are, a certain percentage of folks who just never quite got super comfortable with the platform and the various things they needed to do. And so we will be going through that with folks in a more intentional way. And so right now, the program is super flexible. So here is the certificate, and this is linked on the landing page. Here are the options. First of all, here are all of the topics, and we've broken them out a little bit so that folks who are in different programmatic areas, organizers, communications, fundraising, can see kind of what topics might be highest priority for them. And then here are the different levels. So level 1, et cetera, kind of what it takes to graduate at different levels. Then there's the recordings. So these are all of the kind of extensive courses on different programs, different topics, and on the back end, actually, let me just go through it this way. So just to so you see what it looks like on the back end, this is an example. This is the Twitter for Organizing course, and it's broken down. It's really extensive. It starts with a beginner intro to organizing, using Twitter for organizing, and just to click on one, for example, everything is in small modules. From you. And can be downloadable, so people are, sometimes listening to them at the gym. Totally great. And then each segment has quiz questions that confirm people's knowledge. So they're not graded, but people get immediate feedback on what's correct and can be useful for testing your knowledge. And so we've put a ton of work into breaking these out and having them be very topical, so people can go look for exactly what they want to learn more about. I mentioned the small support team throughout, and this cohort had enough folks register that we did a bunch of small group sessions. If enough people request them, like 5 people or so, we can do small group sessions, and we've done them on things like improving conversions on your donate page, Google Analytics, different topics in Google Analytics, a whole range like that. We already went over the registrant supervisor questionnaire. And the other way, though, that we think it's really important to help supervisors who are supervising people who are doing digital campaigning it's kind of it's a somewhat new field, right? It's a new range of combination of tools and tactics. And so there's not a lot of support out there for people who are trying to be intentional about developing and nurturing those kinds of skills, and particularly those skills in a strategic, smart way in the organization that supports organizing. So we're going to be more intentionally pulling supervisors together in small groups, and we're making one of these small group sessions a requirement that supervisors participate in. It'll be somewhere around the middle of the program, just to kind of talk with each other, find out what's working, get ideas from each other, et cetera. And then the participant community. So again, these are meetings rather than webinars. There's a Slack channel where people can talk with each other. There's a small group support team, and there's a shared leaderboard. And I'll just quickly show you what that is. It's not that, it is this. So we have a file that, all of the participants are down on the left column. These are all the weekly assignments. And people fill in what they've completed. And then this is the leaderboard where it automatically tells you, it ranks people based on how much they've completed. And for some people that's motivating, and it certainly helps us get a sense of where people are at. And I'm almost done here. Last slide before I turn this over to a lot of other folks. So basically the time commitment, the minimum is 2 hours per week for 5 weeks. Well, 5 weeks, not really, 5 sessions. So actually that's a typo because it's really more like 10 weeks. So that would be for certificate level 1. And the maximum is the advanced certificate level 3. which involves 3 to 5 hours per week over the 9 months. And there are 3 ways to share the content with other staff or leaders. So that's the other thing that we're being more intentional about, having this conversation with groups around not just leveling up the participant, but how can you extend that and make the most of all of this content within your organization. So sharing the recordings is kind of an obvious one, right? But also live sessions, even though one registration means one access to the Zoom session, you can have other people, coming around the computer together. And then you can also divide up topics. So you can decide that your main registrant who will be eligible for the certificate, maybe they're going to focus on 5 of the sessions, but maybe you've got people from either other departments or other staff that will be in on the other sessions, and they'll take the lead on the other sessions and won't even and get on the live session, etc. They won't be able to earn the certificate unless they're registered, but they can get all the learnings. The first of the sessions will be September 18th, and we are trying to get everybody registered by September 1st, just so we can focus on getting it started after that and getting everybody up on it, what they need to be up on. But we do have people register up through December and even into January, which is not the best. People who come in as late as January, they're they already feel behind, right? So, but we do have people coming in later. And so cost per organization is $1,800. After September 1st, it goes to $2,000 for the first person, and then $600 for each additional person per organization. And then like CPD and Blueprint North Carolina both set up group rates. So and we can set up a web portal, and State Voices and others have done that in the past, where we just set up a page where they can send the link out to all of their network. And CPD, I think you guys might be doing, well, no, I'm not sure you're doing this. Actually, I think you've just paid the group rate. But in other words, that's a way for, there's still a 15-person minimum on that. It's possible that we could work something out like that with a funder, but we should talk about, like, if you wanted to make this available, if funders want to make this available at a lower kind of group rate for their grantees, we can definitely work with that. We do have a scholarship application that is on the site, on the registration site landing page, and we can work with groups, but the first step we ask groups to do before they fill out the scholarship application is 2 things. One, see if you're part of a network, and we will have a conversation. We're glad to spend time with you having a conversation with your organizing network about how they could set up a portal so that everybody can have access for 600 instead of 1,800. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, a lot of funders have told us they would be glad to support groups taking this training, and some of them have capacity building pots of money. And so we would want to have a conversation with you. We would want to make sure you've already had conversations with your funders about that. And we're also happy to join you in having a conversation with a program officer if they need some more information about the program. There's a couple of questions around, is this program mostly with progressive organizations and nonprofits? And if I work for myself, can I have access? Can I take the course? So it's extremely important to be able to do the work in this course that you be based in an organizing group of some kind, in some kind of advocacy / organizing group. You can't really implement what we talk about without that. And this isn't a course for someone who's in more of a consulting role. We are being intentional about developing a space where everybody is pretty much based in an organizing group of some kind. So if that's not you and you really, really want to do this, reach out and we can have a conversation. SMT is developing at least one, and if we can manage it more, but apprenticeships. And so you'll be hearing about this soon. It'll start also in September, probably. But there's a team of 3 really fantastic graphic design people with a lot of movement experience who are putting together a 3-month, 12-session apprenticeship program in graphic design for organizing. We've heard that this is something that people need and want. And so I'll just mention that we also may do the same thing for ad campaigns. And we're thinking about doing it for video as well, but we'll see.